Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they never stop to understand themselves. If you don't decide who you are, the world will decide for you. You can work hard every day and still be running in the wrong direction. Before success ever shows up in your life, something quieter happens first, something invisible, something most people rush past because it doesn't come with applause or instant results. That something is self-awareness. Not motivation, not discipline, not talent, self-awareness. Most people think success starts when you do more, work harder, wake up earlier, push longer. But effort without understanding is just movement, not progress. You can be busy every day and still be lost. You can achieve things and still feel empty. You can climb fast and realize you're on the wrong ladder. That's what happens when action comes before awareness. Self-awareness means knowing what drives you when nobody is watching. It means recognizing your strengths without arrogance and your weaknesses without excuses. It means understanding what energizes you and what drains you, what you stand for and what you will walk away from, what matters deeply to you and what only looks important because others said it was. When you lack self-awareness, you chase definitions of success that don't belong to you. You compare your timeline to people with different values, you measure your worth using someone else's ruler, and slowly, without noticing, you disconnect from yourself. You start living on autopilot, reacting instead of choosing, copying instead of creating. Success built without self-awareness is fragile. It depends on validation. It collapses the moment criticism shows up. It feels heavy because it was never aligned, but when success grows from self-awareness, it feels grounded. You're not easily shaken because you know why you started. You're not easily distracted because you know what you're aiming for. Self-awareness forces you to ask uncomfortable questions. Why do I want this? Is this my goal or someone else's expectation? Am I avoiding something by staying busy? These questions slow you down, but they also save you years of regret. Because clarity early prevents confusion later. People often say they want confidence, but confidence is not pretending to have all the answers. Confidence is knowing yourself well enough to trust your decisions even when the outcome is uncertain. That trust doesn't come from success, it comes from awareness. When you understand your values, your decisions stop feeling random. Even failure makes sense because it teaches you something specific about yourself. Without self-awareness, mistakes feel personal. With self-awareness, mistakes feel informative. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That shift changes everything. It turns life into feedback instead of judgment. Self-awareness also reveals patterns. You begin to notice where you quit, where you procrastinate, where fear disguises itself as logic. You see how you respond under pressure, how you handle uncertainty, how you talk to yourself when things don't go your way. Most people never listen to that inner dialogue. They let it run their lives without questioning it. Success requires repetition. Repetition requires consistency. Consistency requires knowing yourself well enough to design habits you can actually sustain. If you don't know how you work, you'll keep forcing systems that don't fit you. You'll rely on motivation instead of structure, and motivation always fades. Self-awareness doesn't make the journey easier, it makes it honest, it removes illusions, it exposes excuses, it forces responsibility. But it also gives direction. When you know yourself, you stop trying to be everything. You focus on becoming the right thing. You don't need to know everything to succeed. You need to know yourself, your limits, your values, your reasons, because success doesn't begin the day the world recognizes you. It begins the moment you recognize yourself from a young age. Many people are taught that putting themselves first is wrong. That thinking about your own needs makes you greedy, arrogant, or uncaring, so you learn to shrink, you learn to adjust, you learn to say yes when you mean no, and over time you start confusing self-neglect with humility and burnout with loyalty. But putting yourself first is not selfish, it is foundational. You cannot pour from an empty cup, yet most people are praised for trying. They give their time, their energy, their focus, their dreams, and they wonder why they feel exhausted, invisible, and resentful. It's not because they care too much, it's because they forgot themselves in the process. When you don't put yourself first, you train the world how to treat you. You teach people that your limits are flexible, that your needs are optional, that your well-being can wait. And once that pattern is set, it becomes harder to break because everyone benefits from your silence except you. Putting yourself first doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop abandoning yourself. It means you recognize that your life is not a rehearsal and your energy is not unlimited. Every yes costs something. Every commitment takes a piece of you. And if you never choose yourself, you slowly disappear behind the roles you play. There is a difference between being kind and being consumed. Kindness has boundaries, self. Sacrifice without awareness becomes self-destruction. When you put yourself first, you begin to act with intention instead of guilt. You help because you choose to, not because you're afraid of disappointing someone. Many people fear that prioritizing themselves will make them lonely, but the truth is, neglecting yourself already has. You can be surrounded by people and still feel disconnected when you're not being honest about who you are and what you need. Real connection starts when you stop pretending you're okay with things that quietly drain you. Putting yourself first also means protecting your time. Time is the only resource you can never earn back. When you give it away without thought, you give away pieces of your future. Every hour spent on things that don't align with your values pulls you further from the life you say you want. When you prioritize yourself, clarity replaces chaos. You stop running on obligation and start moving with purpose. You choose rest without shame. You say no without long explanations. You understand that boundaries are not walls, they are doors that decide what gets access to you. Growth requires space, and space only exists when you stop filling every moment with everyone else's demands. When you put yourself first, you create room to reflect, to heal, to plan, to evolve. You begin to hear your own thoughts again instead of constant noise. People who don't put themselves first often confuse being needed with being valued, but being needed can trap you. Being valued respects you. The moment you start valuing yourself, some people will resist. Not because you changed for the worse, but because the version of you they benefited from no longer exists. That resistance is not a signal to stop, it's confirmation. Putting yourself first requires courage because it forces you to let go of approval. It asks you to trust that your worth does not come from how much you give away, but from who you are when you stand on your own. It shifts your identity from pleasing to choosing. When you begin choosing yourself, your decisions become cleaner. You stop over-explaining, you stop apologizing for having standards, you stop confusing exhaustion with productivity, you recognize that taking care of yourself is not a reward you earn after burning out, but a responsibility you honor every day. A stronger you creates healthier relationships, a fulfilled you gives without resentment, a grounded you leads without control. When you put yourself first, you don't become less generous, you become more intentional, more present, more real. Every person begins their journey surrounded by noise, opinions, expectations, comparisons, advice, criticism, praise. Some of it is well intended, some of it is careless, all of it is loud, and if you don't know your why, that noise will decide your direction for you. Outside noise is powerful because it feels urgent. It tells you what you should want, how fast you should move, and who you should become. It rewards conformity and punishes patience. It convinces you that if everyone is running in one direction, standing still means you're falling behind. Without a strong why, you start chasing relevance instead of meaning. Your why is not your goal. Goals change. Circumstances shift. Outcomes evolve. Your why is the reason you continue when progress is invisible. It's the reason you stay disciplined when motivation fades. It's what gives your actions weight when no one is watching and no one is applauding. When your why is weak, you negotiate with yourself. You quit early. You compromise your values for convenience. You follow trends that don't align with you because they promise quick validation. The outside noise becomes louder than your inner voice, and slowly, you forget what you originally cared about. But when your why is strong, the noise doesn't disappear, it just loses authority. Opinions become background sound instead of commands. Criticism becomes information instead of identity. Praise becomes encouragement instead of dependency. You listen, but you don't surrender. A strong why gives you patience in a world addicted to speed. It allows you to build quietly while others perform loudly. It keeps you grounded when success arrives and steady when failure shows up. Without it, both praise and rejection can knock you off course. Many people believe they need confidence to define their why. In reality, defining your why creates confidence. When you know what you're working toward and why it matters to you, hesitation loses its grip. You may still feel fear, but fear no longer controls your decisions. Outside noise often disguises itself as logic. It tells you to be realistic, to play it safe, to wait for the right time. It tells you that people like you don't succeed in places like that. Without a strong why, those voices sound reasonable. With a strong why, they sound limited. Your why must be personal. Borrowed reasons don't last. If your why exists to impress someone, prove something, or avoid judgment, it will collapse the moment resistance appears. A real why is internal. It's tied to your values, your experiences, your vision of who you refuse to become. When the noise gets loud, people often look for reassurance from others, but reassurance fades quickly. What lasts is alignment. When your actions align with your why, doubt has less room to grow. You stop seeking permission and start trusting your direction. A strong why also helps you say no. No to distractions that look attractive but lead nowhere. No to opportunities that pay well but cost your peace. No to paths that promise shortcuts but compromise who you are. Without a why, every option looks tempting. With a why, decisions become simpler. Outside noise thrives on comparison. It constantly asks you to measure your progress against someone else's highlight reel. Your why brings you back to your own timeline. It reminds you that your pace is not a weakness, and your path doesn't need validation to be valid. There will be moments when the noise feels overwhelming, when doubt feels logical, when quitting feels justified. In those moments, your why is not there to make you feel better, it's there to make you continue. It doesn't remove discomfort, it gives discomfort meaning. There comes a moment in every life when progress stops not because of lack of opportunity, but because of misplaced responsibility. It's easier to point outward than to look inward. Easier to explain why something didn't work than to examine your role in it. Blame feels relieving in the short term because it removes pressure. Responsibility feels heavy because it places that pressure back where it belongs. Blame tells a comforting story. It says you tried your best, the system was unfair, the timing was wrong, the people were against you. Sometimes those things are true. Life is not equal. Circumstances matter. But blame keeps you frozen in the moment something went wrong. Responsibility moves you forward from it. Taking responsibility doesn't mean accepting fault for everything. It means accepting control over what happens next. It means recognizing that while you may not have chosen your starting point, you are choosing your direction every day. Without responsibility, growth becomes impossible because learning requires ownership. Blame externalizes power. It places your future in the hands of people, systems, or events you cannot control. Responsibility internalizes power. It puts your future back in your hands where it can actually be shaped. The difference between the two determines whether you feel like a victim of circumstances or a participant in your own life. Many people confuse responsibility with self-criticism. They believe that owning their actions means being harsh with themselves. In reality, responsibility is an act of respect. It says you trust yourself enough to face reality without excuses. It replaces shame with clarity. When you choose responsibility, your language changes. You stop saying, "I couldn't because they didn't." You start saying, "I didn't, and here's what I'll do differently." That shift may seem small, but it transforms how you approach challenges. It turns setbacks into feedback instead of final judgments. Blame keeps you emotionally attached to the past. Responsibility keeps you focused on the future. The more energy you spend replaying who caused what, the less energy you have to build what comes next. Responsibility doesn't erase the past, but it refuses to live in it. There is discomfort in responsibility because it removes excuses. It exposes habits you'd rather ignore. It highlights choices you avoided. But that discomfort is productive. It creates awareness, and awareness is the starting point of change. People who avoid responsibility often wait for motivation. People who accept responsibility build discipline. Motivation is emotional, discipline is intentional, responsibility bridges the gap between intention and action, it doesn't wait for ideal conditions, it works with what is available. Responsibility also changes how you handle failure. Instead of defending your ego, you examine your process. Instead of protecting your image, you improve your approach. This mindset doesn't make you immune to failure, but it makes failure useful. Blame isolates. It creates distance between you and others. Responsibility connects. It builds trust because people respect those who own their actions. In leadership, in relationships, in personal growth, responsibility signals reliability. It shows that you don't disappear when things get difficult. Choosing responsibility requires humility. You must accept that you are not always right, that you have blind spots, that effort alone doesn't guarantee results. But humility paired with responsibility is powerful. It keeps you learning instead of defending. Responsibility also restores momentum. When you stop waiting for others to change, you start changing. When you stop expecting fairness, you start creating progress. When you stop blaming circumstances, you start designing solutions. Life doesn't become easier when you choose responsibility. It becomes clearer. You see what you can control and what you must release. You stop wasting energy on resentment and start investing it in growth. Keynote 5. Consistency beats motivation. Motivation is celebrated because it feels powerful. It comes with energy, excitement, and urgency. It makes you feel capable of anything, ready to start immediately, convinced that this time will be different. But motivation is emotional, and emotions are temporary. They rise and fall based on mood, environment, and circumstances. Consistency, on the other hand, is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wait for the right feeling. It simply shows up. Most people fail not because they lack desire, but because they rely on motivation to carry them through moments where discipline is required. Motivation is great at starting things. It is terrible at sustaining them. The days that matter most are not the days you feel inspired. They are the days you feel tired, distracted, bored, or discouraged. Consistency is what carries you through those days. Consistency is a commitment to the process, not the outcome. It's the decision to act even when results are invisible. Progress often happens below the surface long before it becomes visible. Without consistency, people quit during this invisible phase, assuming nothing is working, when in reality everything is aligning. Motivation asks, do I feel like it today? Consistency asks, what did I commit to? That difference changes how you approach your goals. You stop negotiating with your emotions and start honoring your decisions. Over time, this builds self-trust, and self-trust is far more valuable than short bursts of inspiration. Consistency also simplifies life. You remove daily decision-making by creating routines that support your goals. You don't rely on willpower because willpower gets exhausted. You rely on systems, and systems don't care how you feel. They create momentum through repetition. Many people underestimate how powerful small, consistent actions can be. They look for dramatic changes and overnight success, but real transformation is cumulative. It's the result of doing the right thing repeatedly, even when the effort feels insignificant. Consistency compounds. What feels small today becomes significant over time. When you depend on motivation, inconsistency becomes normal. You start strong, slow down, stop, and then restart. This cycle creates frustration and self-doubt. You begin to question your ability when the real issue was never ability, but approach. Consistency removes that cycle. It replaces intensity with reliability. Consistency also reshapes identity. Every time you show up, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who follows through. That identity shift changes behavior naturally. You don't force yourself to act. Acting becomes part of who you are. Motivation changes how you feel. Consistency changes who you become. There will be days when consistency feels unrewarding. When effort goes unnoticed, when progress feels slow, those are the moments where most people stop. But consistency is not about immediate gratification. It's about long-term alignment. It's about choosing growth over comfort repeatedly. Consistency does not require perfection. Missing a day is not failure. Quitting is. Consistency allows flexibility without abandonment. You adjust, but you don't disappear. You pause, but you don't retreat. This mindset keeps you moving forward without the pressure of unrealistic standards. Motivation is often external. It comes from speeches, videos, praise, or fear. Consistency is internal. It's driven by values, discipline, and self-respect. When external sources fade, internal commitment remains. Consistency also builds resilience. When challenges arise, you don't panic. You adapt and continue. You've built the habit of persistence. You understand that setbacks are part of the process, not signals to stop. In the end, success rarely comes from one powerful moment. It comes from many ordinary moments handled with discipline. Consistency turns ordinary actions into extraordinary outcomes over time. When you look at it closely, everything comes back to one truth. The quality of your life is shaped by how well you understand yourself, how boldly you choose yourself, how clearly you define your why, how honestly you take responsibility, and how consistently you show up. Success is not a sudden moment. It's not applause. It's not recognition. It's alignment. Alignment between who you are, what you believe, and how you act when no one is watching. When you become self-aware, you stop drifting. When you put yourself first, you stop breaking. When your why is stronger than the noise, you stop wavering. When you choose responsibility over blame, you stop waiting. And when you stay consistent, you stop starting over. This is how real growth happens, quietly, repeatedly, intentionally. You don't need to become someone new. You need to return to who you were before fear, comparison, and expectations pulled you away. You don't need more motivation. You need more clarity. You don't need approval. You need alignment. Thinking about yourself always is not about ego. It's about ownership. Ownership of your thoughts, your choices, your standards, and your direction. Because the moment you stop outsourcing your life to circumstances and opinions, you step into control.